I was staring at the sprawling estate through the Uber window, my stomach twisting into knots tighter than the pretentious wrought iron gates that protected the Walker family compound. My husband Jake squeezed my hand reassuringly, his touch contrasting with the cold reception I knew awaited me inside. "Naomi, it's just a weekend," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "We'll be gone before you know it. Just a weekend." 48 hours of subtle jabs about my modest background, questioning glances at my clothes, and his mother's practiced sighs when I used the wrong fork. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the outsider. I smoothed down my dress, a designer, piece I'd splurged on just for this occasion, and checked my reflection in my compact mirror. My deep brown skin looked flawless, and the gold jewelry I wore complemented the rich burgundy of my dress. I'd spent hours making sure my hair was perfect, each curl precisely placed. To anyone else, I might have looked like I belonged. But the Walkers were experts at making me feel like I didn't. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. As our driver pulled up to the main house, I saw them assembled on the grand porch like a royal family greeting their subjects. Jake's parents, Richard and Vivian Walker, stood at the center, flanked by his sisters Eliza and Catherine with their investment banker husbands. Everyone dressed in pastels and pearls, with smiles that never quite reached their eyes. "Remember," Jake whispered as we stepped out of the car. "They don't know about the company yet." I nodded stiffly. 3 years ago, I'd left my stable job at a prestigious marketing firm to start my own business. Everyone, including Jake initially, thought I was making a terrible mistake. His family had been particularly vocal about my reckless decision. What they didn't know was that my little venture had recently been valued at over $200 million after our latest funding round. Jake and I had decided to keep it quiet until the deal was fully finalized, which had happened just yesterday. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. "Darling," Vivian Walker air-kissed both of my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming. "How interesting that dress is on you. So bold for a family gathering." First jab less than 10 seconds in. A new record. "Jake, son." Richard clapped my husband on the shoulder while barely acknowledging me. "Hope that job at Henderson and Mills is still treating you well." Jake had actually left that job 6 months ago to join my company as COO, but we'd kept that quiet, too. His family thought he was still grinding away at the prestigious law firm they'd pulled strings to get him into. "Let's not stand around in this heat," Vivian declared, ushering everyone inside. "The caterers have prepared something special." The Walker estate was a monument to old money and older prejudices. Oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors lined walls covered in silk damask. Antique furniture that looked uncomfortable but cost more than most people's homes filled every room. Everything screamed of inherited wealth and the smug security that came with it. Lunch was served in the formal dining room, a space bigger than our first apartment. I tried to keep my head down, focusing on not using the wrong fork or drinking from the wrong glass. But Eliza had other plans. "So, Naomi," she said my name like she was handling something distasteful. "Jake mentioned you're still doing that little business of yours. What was it again? Social media for small companies?" "Digital marketing and brand development," I corrected politely. "And yes, it's going well." "How quaint," Catherine chimed in. "It must be so fulfilling to have a hobby." I bit my tongue. My hobby had clients in 27 countries and a team of 93 employees, but I smiled and nodded. "I'm just glad Jake's career can support these little experiments," Richard said, raising his glass toward his son. "Stability is what builds dynasties, after all." Jake shifted uncomfortably beside me. We'd rehearsed this moment, promised each other we'd keep our news quiet until dinner tomorrow night. But I could feel his resolve weakening with each condescending comment. "Actually," he started, and I placed my hand on his thigh, squeezing gently. "Not yet. Speaking of stability, Vivian smoothly redirected. Catherine's husband just made partner at Goldman. They're looking at vacation homes in Martha's Vineyard now. The conversation carried on around us: property values, stock portfolios, country, club memberships, the Walker family's version of small talk. I smiled and nodded at all the right moments while feeling increasingly invisible. After lunch, the men retreated to Richard's study for brandy, while the women gathered in the sunroom for tea. I tried to beg off, claiming a headache, but Vivian insisted. "Family traditions are important, Naomi," she said firmly. "Even for those who marry in." The sunroom was Vivian's domain, a glass-enclosed space filled with exotic plants and wickedly uncomfortable Victorian furniture. Eliza and Catherine sat primly on either side of their mother, leaving me to perch awkwardly on a chair opposite them, feeling like I was at a job interview I was destined to fail. "We were just discussing the charity gala next month," Vivian said, pouring tea into delicate cups. "It's for the Children's Hospital. Tickets are $5,000 per plate." "How wonderful," I replied, accepting a cup. "Of course, we've reserved a table for the whole family," she continued, not looking at me. "Though I understand if it's beyond your means right now. No one would think less of you." But they would, and we all knew it. "Actually," I began, ready to tell them I'd be happy to attend. "We all have different priorities," Eliza cut in smoothly. "Not everyone values philanthropy the same way our family does." "It's not about the money," Catherine added with faux sincerity. "It's about the commitment to community." I took a slow sip of tea, counting to 10 in my head. 3 years of this treatment, and it still stung every time. "How is your little business doing anyway?" Vivian asked suddenly, her eyes sharp. "Jake mentioned you were looking for investors a while back. Any luck?" The moment had a predatory feel to it, like she was fishing for confirmation of my failure. I thought about the documents I'd signed yesterday, the ones that made me one of the youngest female founders to reach unicorn status in the tech industry. I thought about the features in Forbes and Business Insider that would be published next week. "It's coming along," I said simply. "Well, we were all surprised when you left that good position at, what was it called?" Vivian waved her hand dismissively. "Harrington and Global," I supplied. "The top marketing firm in the country, but sure, pretend you don't remember." "Yes, that. Such a stable career path. But I suppose some people aren't built for the long game." The sunroom door opened, saving me from having to respond. Jake appeared, followed by his father and brothers-in-law. The tension in Jake's jaw told me everything I needed to know about how his time in the study had gone. "Dinner will be served in an hour," Vivian announced, rising gracefully. "Naomi, dear, do try to wear something a bit more appropriate. We have standards for dinner." I felt Jake's hand tighten around mine as we walked back to our guest room. The moment the door closed behind us, he exploded. "I can't believe them," he hissed, loosening his tie with angry movements. "Do you know what my father said to me in there? He asked if I was still supporting your wife's little hobby and offered to have a word with Henderson and Mills about a raise." I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "It's fine, Jake. We knew this was coming." "It's not fine." He paced the length of the room. "You're the most successful person in this house by a mile, and they're treating you like you're some kind of charity case." I watched him fume, his face flushed with anger. This was exactly why we'd agreed to wait until tomorrow's dinner to reveal our news. Emotions were already running high. "Look," I said, taking his hands in mine. "We stick to the plan. Tomorrow. At dinner, we'll tell them everything. Let's just get through tonight." He nodded reluctantly, then pulled me into a hug. "I'm sorry," he murmured into my hair. "I promised you it would get better, that they would see how amazing you are." "They see what they want to see," I replied. I changed into a more appropriate dress for dinner, a conservative black number that still probably cost more than Vivian thought I made in a month. Jake and I descended the grand staircase together, his hand a reassuring presence at the small of my back. Dinner was a formal affair with multiple courses and an obscene amount of silverware. The conversation flowed around various topics: politics, conservative, business, traditional, and the occasional not-so-subtle dig at new money aimed at me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Naomi, Richard called from the head of the table after the main course had been cleared. Jake tells me your parents couldn't make it to our last family gathering. Or the one before that. Or any of them, actually. The table fell silent, everyone's eyes turning to me. My parents, a hard-working nurse and a high school teacher, were always the elephant in the room at Walker family gatherings. They've been busy, I said evenly. My father's health hasn't been the best lately. Oh, how unfortunate, Vivian said without a hint of genuine concern. I suppose the healthcare system can be quite challenging when you don't have connections. I felt Jake tense beside me. My parents had declined every invitation to the Walker estate, not because they were busy, but because the one and only time they'd visited, they'd been subjected to such thinly veiled racism and classism that my mother had cried the entire drive home. Actually, I began, measuring my words carefully, my father's getting excellent care. The specialists at Mayo Clinic are— Mayo, Richard interrupted, his eyebrows shooting up. That's quite premium. Care for a— What does your father do again? Teach geography? History, I corrected, my tone cooling. He taught history for 30 years. Well, Eliza chimed in with a saccharine smile. It's so admirable what public servants can accomplish with such limited resources. Before I could respond, Catherine changed the subject to her son's acceptance into an exclusive preschool, effectively dismissing my family as a topic worthy of discussion. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of thinly veiled insults and condescending comments. By the time dessert was served, my jaw ached from forcing a smile, and my nails had left crescent marks in my palms. As coffee was being served in the drawing room after dinner, Vivian corralled everyone into a discussion about the family's annual summer retreat. We're thinking the house in the Hamptons this year, she announced. 2 glorious weeks in August. Oh, but isn't that when you and Jake were planning your little trip to visit your parents? Richard asked me with feigned innocence. Jake and I had been planning to fly my parents to meet us in Paris for their 35th wedding anniversary, a surprise trip I'd been organizing for months. We can work around it, Jake said quickly. Nothing's set in stone. I stared into my coffee cup, saying nothing. This was classic Walker manipulation. Make plans that intentionally conflict, then make us choose. And when we chose my family, they'd add it to their mental tally of ways I was pulling Jake away from his real family. Well, family should come first, Vivian said pointedly, looking directly at me. But I understand if your priorities lie elsewhere, Naomi. Not everyone has the same appreciation for family traditions. Something inside me snapped. 3 years of biting my tongue, of trying to earn their respect, of pretending their words didn't cut straight to my core. Actually, Vivian, I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. I agree completely. Family should always come first. The surprise on her face was almost comical. She'd expected me to either acquiesce or create conflict. My agreement threw her off balance. Well, she recovered quickly, I'm glad we see eye to eye on something. In fact, I continued, setting my coffee cup down with deliberate precision, that's why Jake and I are flying my parents to Paris for their anniversary. First-class tickets are already booked. The suite at the Ritz is confirmed. A hush fell over the room. Vivian's smile froze on her face. The Ritz? Eliza echoed, her voice tinged with disbelief. In Paris? Yes, I replied simply. It seemed appropriate for a 35th anniversary celebration. How generous, Richard said slowly, his eyes narrowing. Business must be better than we thought. It is, Jake interjected, moving to stand beside me. His hand found the small of my back. Much better. Catherine laughed nervously. Well, I suppose even small businesses have good years. Though I'd be careful about spending it all at once, Naomi. Sustainability is key. That's when Richard decided to go for the kill. He leaned forward in his leather armchair, swirling his brandy. Let's be frank, shall we? He said, his voice dropping to that authoritative tone that had probably intimidated countless business rivals. We've all been concerned about Naomi's influence on Jake's career trajectory, leaving a prestigious law firm to, what was it, explore new opportunities? And now these extravagant expenditures. He sighed heavily, as if the weight of our poor decisions was physically burdening him. I think it's time for a reality check, he continued. This playing at entrepreneurship might seem exciting, but it's not a sustainable path. Jake has responsibilities, to this family, to our legacy. And Naomi, I'm sorry to be blunt, but your business venture was always going to be a failure. It's simply not what people from your background typically succeed at. The room fell dead silent. Even Vivian looked shocked at her husband's blatant statement. Jake's body went rigid beside me. Dad, he started, his voice dangerously low. You need to apologize right now. But Richard Walker wasn't finished. He stood up, towering over the sitting area. No, son. You need to hear this. We've been patient. We've watched you throw away opportunities, all because you're trying to support this. He gestured at me dismissively. Fantasy that your wife has about being some kind of business mogul. It's time to face reality. Some people just aren't cut out for success in our world. The words hung in the air, ugly and exposed. No more subtlety, no more thinly veiled insults. Just raw, unfiltered prejudice. I felt something shift inside me, a final thread of hope that I might someday be accepted by these people snapped clean. But instead of pain, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my dress. You're right about one thing, Richard, I said, my voice steady. Some people aren't cut out for success in your world. I turned to Jake, who was practically vibrating with rage. I think I need some air, I said quietly. Excuse me. I walked out of the drawing room with my head held high, ignoring Vivian's hissed admonishment to her husband. I made my way through the grand hallway and out onto the front porch, gulping in the cool night air. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a text from my assistant. Jet is fueled and ready per your instructions. ETA 20 minutes. Perfect timing, I heard. The front door opened behind me. Jake's footsteps, I could recognize them anywhere. Naomi, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Don't apologize, I cut him off, turning to face him. Not for them. Never again. He nodded, running. A hand through his hair. I told them. Everything. My eyes widened. You did what? I couldn't listen to another word, he said fiercely. I told them about the company valuation, about my position as COO, about the Forbes profile coming next week. Everything. And? I asked, curious despite myself. He laughed humorlessly. They're in shock. Dad looks like he's about to have a stroke. Mom keeps saying there must be some mistake. In the distance, I heard the distinctive sound of jet engines. Right on time. What's that? Jake asked, looking toward the sky. I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. That, my love, is our ride home. As if on cue, the sleek white private jet appeared over the tree line, its lights gleaming against the dark sky. The custom logo of my company, the one Richard Walker had just called a failure, was emblazoned on its side. You didn't, Jake. Breathed, a slow smile spreading across his face. I did, I replied, watching as the jet circled, clearly preparing to land on the private airstrip adjacent to the Walker estate. an airstrip they'd bragged about all weekend. The front door burst open behind us. The entire Walker family spilled out onto the porch, their faces a comical mix of shock, confusion, and dawning realization. Is that... Vivian couldn't even finish her sentence. My private jet? I supplied helpfully. Yes, it is. Richard stepped forward, his face ashen. But how... Remember that little hobby of mine? I said, enjoying this moment perhaps more than I should have. Turns out it's worth quite a bit more than anyone thought. As the jet touched down on the airstrip, its engines winding down, I turned to Jake. Ready to go home? He grinned and took my hand. More than ready. As we descended the steps of the porch, I couldn't resist one parting shot. I turned back to the stunned Walker family. We won't be able to make it to the Hamptons in August, I said pleasantly. Jake and I will be in Tokyo for our company's international expansion. But do send pictures. With that, we walked hand in hand toward the waiting jet, leaving the Walker family standing frozen on their grand porch, suddenly, looking much smaller than they had before. The jet's stairs descended as we approached. My pilot and flight attendant stood at attention, greeting us with professional nods. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Naomi Walker, Mr. Jake Walker, the flight attendant said smoothly. Where to this evening? I looked back at the Walker estate one last time, meeting Richard's gaze across the distance. Home, I said firmly. We're going home. And as the jet's door closed behind us, I finally felt something I'd been chasing since the day I married into the Walker family. I felt like I belonged. The champagne tasted sweeter at 40,000 feet. I sank into the butter-soft leather seat as Jake gazed out the window, watching his family's estate shrink to the size of a dollhouse before disappearing completely beneath the clouds. His expression was complex. Relief, vindication, and a trace of sadness all mingled together. You okay? I asked, reaching for his hand across the glossy walnut table between us. Better than okay. He smiled, but I could see the weight of what had just happened settling in his eyes. I'm sorry it took me so long to stand up to them. You've always stood up for me, I reminded him gently. Even when it was hard. The flight attendant silently refilled our glasses before retreating to the front cabin. The jet's interior glowed with soft ambient lighting, making the nightmare of the Walker estate feel like it had happened in another lifetime rather than just 30 minutes ago. Did you see my father's face? Jake chuckled, shaking his head, in disbelief. I thought his eyeballs were going to pop out of his skull when he saw the company logo on the side of the jet. I laughed, remembering Richard Walker's expression of utter shock. 3 years, I said quietly. 3 years of condescension, of being treated like I was beneath them. And all it took was one jet to shut them up. Not just any jet, Jake corrected. Your jet. Bought with your success, your vision, your refusal to let anyone, including me initially, tell you what you couldn't do. I traced the rim of my champagne flute, thinking back to when I'd first proposed leaving my safe, prestigious job to start my own company. Jake had been concerned, not because he didn't believe in me, but because he knew how brutal startups could be. His family, however, had been openly derisive. Do you remember what your mother said when I told them I was starting my own business? I asked. Jake grimaced. Something patronizing about hobbies being important for housewives? She said, How quaint, dear. Everyone needs a little project to keep themselves occupied while the men handle the real work. I took a sip of champagne. And your father asked if I'd considered taking up tennis instead, since it had better networking opportunities. Jake covered his face with his hands. God, they're awful. I don't know how I never saw it before. Because they're your parents, I said simply. And they were never awful to you. The truth was, Jake had been raised in a bubble of privilege where people like me, dark-skinned, from a middle-class background, with parents who worked with their hands rather than their stock portfolios, were rarely seen, and certainly never, considered equals. He'd broken out of that mindset long before we met, but his family remained entrenched in their prejudices. "Do you think they'll call?" Jake asked after a moment of silence. I considered this. Richard Walker's pride was legendary, but so was his pragmatism. A connection to a $200 million company would ultimately mean more to him than his outdated biases. "Your father will call within 3 days," I predicted. "He'll start with a half apology about tensions running high, and then pivot to suggesting a fresh start that conveniently includes exploring synergies between Walker Industries and my company." Jake laughed. "That's eerily accurate." And, "Your mother will call you separately," I continued, warming to my prediction. "She'll claim she had no idea her husband was going to say such unfortunate things, and that she's always admired my spunk." "Spunk," Jake repeated, rolling his eyes. "God, I can hear her saying that." "And Eliza and Catherine?" "They'll follow their parents' lead," Jake said confidently. "But they'll add their own passive-aggressive twist. Probably something about being so happy things worked out after such. A rocky start." We both laughed, the absurdity of it all finally hitting us. For years, the Walker family had loomed large in our lives, their approval or disapproval shaping more of our decisions than I cared to admit. And now, in the space of one evening, that power had evaporated. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Jake said suddenly. "What's that?" "That you didn't tell them about the company just to prove them wrong. You kept quiet because it was the smart business decision to wait until the funding round was complete. Not because you needed their validation or wanted to stick it to them." Smiled, touched by his observation. "Although I have to admit, the look on your father's face when that jet landed was pretty satisfying." "It was spectacular," Jake agreed with a grin. "Worth every penny of that rush landing fee." My phone buzzed with an incoming call. I glanced at the screen and felt my stomach drop. My assistant's name flashed urgently. "Maya, what's wrong?" Answered, immediately on alert. Maya never called after hours unless it was critical. "Naomi, I'm so sorry to interrupt your weekend." Maya's voice was tense. "But Chen just called from the Tokyo office. Takanaka is threatening to pull out of the deal." Jake's head snapped up at this, his expression instantly shifting from relaxed to focused. Takanaka Corporation was our largest potential client in the Asian market, the cornerstone of our international expansion plan. "What happened?" I asked, already mentally shifting from champagne sipping to crisis management. "They're saying another firm has undercut our proposal by 30% and added guaranteed performance metrics we didn't include." "Masani Tech," Jake guessed, his jaw tightening. Maya confirmed it with a sigh. "Yes, they're the ones. Chen says Takanaka is giving us 24 hours to counter, or they're signing with Masani." My mind raced through the implications. Masani Tech was our biggest competitor, and they'd been trying to edge into the Japanese market for months. Their CEO, Derek Masani, was notorious for undercutting deals even at a loss just to block competitors. If they secured the Takanaka contract, our entire Asian expansion strategy would be compromised. "Tell Chen I'll be on a call with him in 30 minutes, I said decisively, "and see if you can get our legal team assembled for a virtual meeting in an hour." "On it," Maya replied. "And Naomi?" Chen mentioned something else. He thinks someone leaked parts of our proposal to Masani. The counteroffer had too many specific responses to our unique selling points. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "We'll discuss that on the call. Thanks, Maya." I hung up and met Jake's concerned gaze. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad enough that our celebration might have to wait," I replied, already pulling my laptop from my bag. "Takanaka is wavering, and Masani is circling like a shark." Jake immediately shifted into COO mode. "If they've undercut us by 30%, they're operating at a loss. That's not sustainable." "But it might be enough to shut us out of the Japanese market entirely," I reminded him. "And if they've somehow gotten details from our proposal, I didn't need to finish the thought. A leak of that magnitude would be devastating. Our Tokyo expansion had been in the works for over a year. with millions already invested in market research, relationship building, and localization of our services. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Mrs. Walker, we're beginning our descent into New York. ETA 20 minutes. Jake quickly buckled his seatbelt as the jet began its gradual descent. So much for our weekend away from work. Welcome to the glamorous life of entrepreneurship, I said wryly, closing my laptop. Exactly what your father wanted for you. Despite the crisis brewing, Jake laughed. If he only knew. As the jet touched down at Teterboro Airport, I realized that the confident exit from the Walker estate had been the easy part. The real challenges, the ones that had nothing to do with snobbish in-laws and everything to do with building something lasting, were waiting for me back at the office. Our driver was already waiting on the tarmac as we deplaned. The sleek black Escalade whisked us through the night toward our Manhattan apartment, both of us already on our phones coordinating the response to the Takanaka situation. "Chen's setting up the conference call," I told Jake as we sped across the George Washington Bridge. "Legal will be ready in 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Jake nodded, his fingers flying across his phone screen. "I'm pulling the financial models now. If we need to counter, we need to know exactly how far we can go without compromising the entire expansion budget." This was us at our best, a seamless team, each anticipating the other's needs without having to ask. It was what had made our personal relationship work, and what had ultimately transformed my little hobby into an industry-disrupting force. Our apartment building's doorman greeted us with practiced professionalism as we hurried through the lobby to the private elevator. Our penthouse, purchased 6 months ago when the company's valuation first passed 9 figures, was still sparsely furnished. We'd been too busy growing the business to properly settle in. "I'll set up in the office," I said as Jake headed to the kitchen. "Coffee's coming," he called after me. Strong and black, just how crisis management should be. I smiled despite the tension. This was why I'd fallen in love with him, his ability to find humor even in stressful moments, to be supportive without being suffocating. The home office was state-of-the-art, with multiple monitors and a dedicated conference system. Within minutes, I was connected to Chen in Tokyo, his tired face appearing on the main screen. "Naomi-san." He greeted me with a quick bow. "I apologize for disturbing your weekend." "No apologies needed, Chen. Walk me through exactly what happened with Takanaka." As Chen detailed the situation, Jake entered silently with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, setting mine within reach before taking a seat beside me. On another screen, our legal team began joining the emergency meeting one by one, their faces appearing, in a grid of concerned expressions. "The leak is what concerns me most," Chen concluded. "The competing proposal addressed specific points that weren't in our public materials." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Who had access to the full proposal on our side?" Our chief legal officer, Renata, spoke up from her square on the screen. Total of 14 people had the complete document. Core negotiation team, senior leadership, and the board members who requested to review it. 14 people. 14 potential leak sources. Could it have been on Takanaka's side? Jake suggested. Someone there might have shared details during their review process. Chen shook his head. Unlikely. Japanese business culture takes confidentiality very seriously, especially at Takanaka's level, which meant the leak likely came from within our own organization, a far more troubling prospect. Right now, the priority is keeping the Takanaka deal alive, I decided. We can investigate the leak simultaneously but quietly. Renata, I want your team to prepare an NDA violation analysis, but keep it between us for now. The meeting continued for nearly 3 hours, strategies proposed and discarded, financial models adjusted and readjusted. By the time we wrapped up, it was past midnight, and we had a counter-strategy ready. A slight price adjustment coupled with enhanced performance guarantees and a phased implementation timeline that Masani Tech couldn't match due to their limited regional resources. It's not ideal, Jake admitted as we finally collapsed onto our living room sofa. But it protects our margins while giving Takanaka the reassurance they need. I leaned against him, exhaustion suddenly hitting me like a physical weight. And if they still choose Masani? Then we pivot, he said simply. We always do. This was the reality of the success we'd built. Constant vigilance, quick pivots, and the ever-present knowledge that everything could change in an instant. It was exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. Some glamorous CEO life, huh? I murmured. Rushing home from dramatically telling off your in-laws to handle a potential corporate espionage situation. Jake chuckled, his chest rumbling against my cheek. Still better than Sunday dinners at my parents' house. I smiled, thinking about how different our lives were from what the Walkers imagined. They pictured business success as mahogany boardrooms and power lunches. They didn't see the midnight strategy sessions, the constant problem-solving, the delicate balance of aggression and diplomacy required to stay ahead. They saw wealth as something inherited or acquired through careful adherence to established pathways. They couldn't comprehend building something from nothing but an idea and sheer determination. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Maya. Chen just called. Takanaka CEO wants to speak directly with you. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. our time. I showed the message to Jake. That's good, he said confidently. If they wanted to reject our counter, they wouldn't ask for a personal call. I wasn't so sure. In Japanese business culture, bad news was often delivered with extreme courtesy, typically by the highest-ranking person available. But I kept that thought to myself. We'd know soon enough. Let's get some sleep, I suggested. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Jake nodded, but as we were heading to the bedroom, my phone rang again. An unknown number with a familiar area. Code. The same as the Walker estate. Ignore it, Jake said immediately. Whatever it is can wait. I was tempted to follow his advice, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered with a cautious, hello? Naomi. Richard Walker's voice was stiff with forced politeness. I hope I'm not calling too late. I put the phone on speaker so Jake could hear. It's rather late, Richard. What can I do for you? There was a brief pause, during which I could almost hear him swallowing his pride. I wanted to apologize for my words earlier this evening. Tensions were high, and I may have spoken imprecisely. Jake rolled his eyes dramatically at his father's non-apology. Imprecisely, I repeated flatly. Yes, well, Richard cleared his throat. The fact is, I was operating with incomplete information about your business ventures. I suppressed a laugh. Incomplete information. As if my success would have been acceptable to him if only he'd known about it sooner. I see, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I thought perhaps we could meet for lunch next week, he continued smoothly. I'd be very interested to learn more about your company. In fact, there might be some potential synergies with Walker Industries that could benefit us both. Just as I'd predicted. Not even 3 days. Not even 3 hours. The moment Richard Walker realized I had something he valued, his prejudices became remarkably flexible. Jake looked at me questioningly, silently asking how I wanted to handle this. I considered my options. I could shut him down completely, which would be satisfying but potentially create an ongoing rift. Or I could engage on my terms, establishing a new dynamic where Richard Walker no longer held any power over me. I'm afraid my schedule is quite full for the next few weeks, I replied coolly. We're finalizing our expansion into the Asian market. Ah, Richard sounded momentarily thrown off balance. He wasn't used to being denied. Well, perhaps after that's settled? Perhaps, I allowed. Though I should mention that my company has a strict ethical investment policy. We only partner with organizations that demonstrate clear commitments to diversity and inclusion. The silence on the other end was deeply satisfying. Richard Walker's views on such trendy corporate virtue signaling, as he'd once called it, were well known. See? He finally managed. Well, Walker Industries has been making strides in that area, of course. I'm glad to hear it, I said pleasantly. Have your people send over your latest diversity and inclusion metrics, along with your environmental impact report. My team will review them and be in touch if we see alignment with our values. Jake was grinning now, clearly enjoying watching his father navigate this unexpected reversal. Of course, Richard replied stiffly. I'll have those sent over promptly. Wonderful. Is there anything else, Richard? It's quite late, and I have an important call with Tokyo at 8 a.m. No, that's all. Please give my regards to Jake. He sends his regards as well, I said, though Jake was actually making a very different gesture toward the phone. Good night, Richard. I hung up and burst into laughter, Jake joining me a moment. Later. That was brilliant, he managed between laughs. His face is probably purple right now. He'll be on the phone with his PR team at dawn, I predicted, demanding to know why Walker Industries doesn't have a diversity report he can send. Over. Jake pulled me into a hug. I love you, he said simply. And I've never been prouder to be your husband. I melted into his embrace. The stress of the day, both the Walker drama and the Takanaka crisis, finally catching up with me. Even with all the corporate espionage and family drama? Especially with all that, he assured me. It's never boring. As we finally got ready for bed, I checked my email one last time. There was a new message from a familiar name that made my heart skip. A beat. Derek Masani, CEO of Masani Tech, our chief competitor. The subject line read simply, "We should talk." I opened it with a sense of foreboding. Naomi, the email began. I hear you're having some trouble with the Takanaka deal. Perhaps we should discuss a more collaborative approach to the Asian market. I have information that might interest you regarding certain parties within your organization. Breakfast tomorrow? Derek. I showed the email to Jake, whose expression darkened immediately. He's admitting he has inside information, Jake said, his lawyer instincts kicking in. This is practically a confession of corporate espionage. Or a trap, I countered. Derek's too smart to incriminate himself directly. He's fishing for something. Jake considered this. You're not actually considering meeting him, are you? I was quiet for a moment, weighing the possibilities. What if we do have a leak? Someone feeding our confidential information to competitors could sink us faster than any external threat. And what if this is just Derek trying to get in your head before your call with Takanaka? Jake argued. He knows you're under pressure. This could be pure psychological warfare. He had a point. Derek Masani and I had history. We'd both started our companies around the same time, both targeting the same emerging market space. While I'd built my business on deep client relationships and innovative solutions, Derek had developed a reputation for aggressive tactics and undercutting competitors. We'd clashed more than once at industry events. I'll sleep on it, I decided finally. But either way, we need to find out if we have a leak, and fast. As I set my alarm for the early call with Takanaka, I couldn't help but reflect on the day's whiplash-inducing events. Hours ago, my biggest concern had been surviving dinner with the Walkers. Now I was juggling a potentially compromised multi-million-dollar international deal and a possible corporate spy in my organization. But strangely, I preferred these high-stakes business challenges to the petty cruelties of my in-laws. Because, in business, unlike at the Walker family dining table, I knew exactly who I was. A founder, a CEO, a woman who had built something valuable through sheer determination and vision. No private jet landing could ever be as satisfying as that knowledge. As I drifted toward sleep, my phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. This is Vivian Walker. Jake is still my son. Whatever has happened between you and Richard, Please don't punish our son by keeping him from his family. We can work this out like adults. I turned off my phone without replying and curled closer to Jake. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with the Walkers' attempts to reestablish control. Tonight, we had more important battles to prepare for. Morning arrived with brutal efficiency. My alarm blared at 6 a.m., allowing me barely enough time to shower, dress, and review my notes before the critical call with Takanaka. Jake was already up, having slept even less than I had, working through financial projections in the kitchen with coffee as his only fuel. "You look like a CEO," he commented as I emerged in a tailored black suit, my hair pulled back in a sleek bun. It was my power look, the armor I wore when everything was on the line. Let's hope Takanaka thinks so too. I accepted the mug of coffee he offered. "Any updates from Chen?" "He's in position at the Takanaka headquarters," Jake confirmed. Says, "The mood seems positive, but it's hard to tell with Japanese executives. They're masters of the poker face." I nodded, scrolling through my emails. Derek Masani had sent another message overnight. "My offer to meet stands. Some things are better discussed in person. The Takanaka situation is just the beginning." The thinly veiled threat made my stomach tighten. If Masani really did have someone inside our organization, the Takanaka deal might be the least of our problems. "Still thinking about meeting him?" Jake asked, noticing my expression. After the Takanaka call, I decided, let's handle one crisis at a time. My home office felt like mission control as I settled in for the video conference. Multiple screens displayed our presentation materials, financial data, and a live feed of Chen waiting in Takanaka's conference room in Tokyo. The clock ticked relentlessly toward 8 a.m. At exactly 8 hour, my screen filled with the faces of Takanaka's executive team, led by their stern CEO, Hiroshi Takanaka himself. His presence on the call was both an honor and a concern. Japanese CEOs typically only joined negotiations at critical junctures. "Takanaka-san," I greeted him with a respectful bow. "Thank you for making time to speak with me directly." The older man's expression remained neutral. "Walker-san, I appreciate your prompt response to our concerns. I believe in addressing challenges directly." For the next hour, we navigated a complex negotiation. I outlined our enhanced proposal, emphasizing our company's uniquely tailored approach for the Japanese market. Takanaka asked pointed questions about our long-term commitment to the region, our ability to deliver on aggressive timelines, and, most tellingly, how we plan to prevent further confidential information from being compromised. So they knew about the leak too. My suspicion that someone inside my organization was feeding information to Masani grew stronger. "Security is our top priority," I assured him. "We're implementing enhanced protocols effective immediately. The breach you're referring to is being addressed at the highest levels of our organization." Takanaka's eyes narrowed slightly, the Japanese equivalent of raised eyebrows. "You are aware of the situation then?" "Yes," I confirmed, deciding transparency was better than pretense. "And I can assure you it will not happen again." The meeting concluded with cautious optimism. Takanaka would review our revised proposal and give us their decision within 48 hours, a lightning-fast timeline by Japanese business standards. As the video connection ended, I sat back in my chair, simultaneously relieved and more worried than before. "Well?" Jake asked from the doorway where he'd been listening. "They're still considering us," I said. "But they know about the leak, which means it's not just Masani playing mind games. Someone really is feeding our information to competitors." Jake's expression hardened. "We need to find out who, and fast. If we lose the Takanaka deal because someone betrayed us..." He didn't need to finish the thought. Our company's reputation was built on trust and excellence. A high-profile security breach could damage us beyond just losing one client. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Maya, my assistant. "Naomi, Richard Walker is here at the office." she said, without preamble. What? I sat up straight. Why? He says he has those reports you requested and wants to deliver them personally. He's been waiting in reception for 20 minutes. I closed my eyes briefly, processing this latest complication. Richard Walker, showing up unannounced with diversity reports in hand, less than 12 hours after our phone call? This was a power move. His attempt to regain control of the narrative. Tell him I'm in meetings all morning, I decided. He can leave the materials with you. He's insisting on seeing you, Maya replied, a note of discomfort in her voice. Says it's a family matter as well as business. Of course he was. Richard Walker was used to doors opening for him, to people rearranging their schedules to accommodate his presence, and he was deliberately putting my assistant in an awkward position, knowing she wouldn't want to be rude to the father of her boss's husband. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I conceded. Don't offer him coffee. Maya's surprised laugh told me she understood the subtle message. Richard Walker would not be made comfortable while he waited. Jake was already reaching for his jacket. I'm coming with you. No, I said firmly. You need to start the security audit. Find out who might have access to both the Takanaka proposal and connections to Masani Tech. But my father is my problem to handle, I finished for him. You trusted me to build this company from nothing. Trust me to handle Richard Walker. Jake hesitated, then nodded. You're right. Just don't let him get to you. Not anymore, I promised, kissing him quickly before gathering my things. The drive to our corporate headquarters in Midtown gave me time to center myself. Richard Walker's sudden appearance was a calculated move, an attempt to catch me off guard, to shift our interaction to a setting where he might feel more in control. But if there was one place in the world where I was most powerful, it was in the offices of the company I had built from the ground up. Our building's sleek glass facade reflected the morning sunlight as my driver pulled up to the entrance. I stepped out, smoothing my suit jacket and straightening my shoulders. The security guards nodded respectfully as I passed, the elevator attendant offering a quick, "Good morning, Mrs. Walker," as he pressed the button for the executive floor. Maya was waiting for me when the elevator doors opened. "He's in the small conference room," she murmured. "No coffee, as instructed." "Thank you," I replied with a small smile. "Any other fires this morning?" "Just the usual." "Oh, and Derek Masani called. Twice." I nodded, not surprised. "If he calls again, tell him I'll contact him this afternoon." Maya's eyebrows rose slightly, but she simply nodded and made a note on her tablet. I took a moment outside the conference room door, drawing in a deep breath. Then I pushed it open with the confident air of someone entering their own domain, which, of course, I was. Richard Walker stood as I entered, his tailored suit and rigid posture no less imposing in my office than they had been in his mansion. But something subtle had shifted in his demeanor, a barely perceptible uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "Naomi," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Thank you for making time this morning." I shook his hand briefly. "This is unexpected. Richard, I thought we agreed to have your team send over those reports." I believed a personal touch was warranted, given the circumstances. He gestured to a sleek portfolio on the conference table. "And I wanted to see this company of yours, for myself." I remained standing, making no move to invite him to sit again. "Well, now you've seen it. Was there something specific you needed to discuss?" Richard's eyes narrowed slightly at my direct approach. He was used to more deference, more social niceties before getting down to business. "Two things," he said, matching my business-like tone. "First, these reports you requested." He tapped the portfolio. "Walker Industries has actually been quite progressive in our hiring practices and environmental initiatives, despite what you might think." I picked up the portfolio but didn't open it. "I'll have my team review these." "Second," he continued, his voice softening artificially, "family matters. Vivian is quite upset about how things ended yesterday." I imagine she is, I replied neutrally. Having the family's classism and prejudice exposed so publicly must be uncomfortable. Richard's jaw tightened. That's a harsh characterization, but an accurate one. A tense silence stretched between us. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see employees trying not to stare at the unusual confrontation happening in their workspace. Let's be practical, Naomi, Richard finally said. We're both business people. What happened yesterday was unfortunate. Words were exchanged that perhaps shouldn't have been. But surely we can move forward productively. I studied him carefully. Move forward how, exactly? Walker Industries has significant connections in Asian markets, he said, leaning forward slightly. Including Japan, connections that might be valuable to a company looking to expand internationally. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. How? Did he know about our Japanese expansion? That information wasn't public yet. What makes you think we're focusing on Japan? I asked carefully. Richard smiled thinly. I make it my business to know about promising ventures, especially ones connected to my family. Something in his tone set off alarm bells. I'd assumed Richard had come here to make amends or establish a new power dynamic. But what if there was another reason entirely? How exactly did you come by that information, Richard? I pressed. Richard. He waved a dismissive hand. Business circles talk. Nothing confidential, I assure you. But I wasn't convinced. The timing was too convenient. Richard Walker suddenly showing interest in my company just as we were dealing with a potential information leak affecting our Japanese expansion. I see, I said, keeping my expression neutral while my mind raced through possibilities. Well, thank you for bringing these reports personally. I'll be in touch if we see potential for collaboration. Richard stood his ground. That's it? After I've come all this way? What were you expecting, Richard? That I'd immediately agree to some kind of partnership after you called me a failure to my face less than 24 hours ago? His expression hardened. I expected a businesswoman smart enough to recognize opportunity when it presents itself. Walker Industries could open doors for you that would otherwise remain closed. The way you opened doors for Jake? I countered. By trying to force him into a career he didn't want? By dismissing his choices because they didn't align with your vision for the Walker legacy? I've only ever wanted what's best for my son, Richard insisted, color rising in his face. No, I corrected him. You've wanted what's best for the Walker name. There's a difference. Before Richard could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Found something. Need you ASAP. This meeting is over, I said firmly, moving toward the door. Maya will show you out. Richard's face flushed with anger. This isn't how business is done, Naomi. I paused at the door, turning back to face him. You're right. Business is done with mutual respect and transparency. Two things the Walker family has never offered me. Goodbye, Richard. I didn't wait for his response, striding purposefully back to my office where Jake was waiting, his laptop open and his expression grave. What did you find? I asked immediately. Jake turned his screen toward me. Board meeting minutes from 3 months ago. Look who requested detailed information about our international expansion strategy, specifically Japan. I scanned the document, my blood running cold as I saw the name. Preston Walker, Richard's younger brother, and a minor investor in our company from an early funding round. Uncle Preston? I said incredulously. He barely owns 0.5% of the company. Why would he? Jake was already pulling up another document. Because of this. Preston joined the board of Masani Tech as an advisor 2 months ago. It wasn't public yet. I had to dig through SEC filings to find it. The pieces suddenly clicked into horrible alignment. Preston Walker, Richard's brother, had used his position as a minor investor to access confidential information about our expansion, plans, then taken that information to our biggest competitor. And now Richard shows up, conveniently offering connections in Japan, I said slowly. This wasn't just about family drama or hurt pride. He was fishing for more information. Jake nodded grimly. The Walker family business model. If you can't, control it, undermine it. I sank into my chair, mind racing through implications and options. Preston signed NDAs as an investor. We can go after him legally. We should, Jake agreed. But first we need to neutralize the immediate threat to the Takanaka deal. My phone rang. Derek Masani himself this time, not through my assistant. I think it's time I took that meeting, I said, reaching for the phone. Jake looked concerned. Are you sure? Absolutely, but not alone. I smiled grimly. I want our general counsel there too. And I want you to call your Uncle Preston. Tell him you're coming over to discuss a family matter. Don't mention that we know about his Masani connection. Understanding dawned on Jake's face. You're going to trap them both. No more playing defense, I confirmed, answering the call. Derek? Yes, I can meet. Noon today, my office. And Derek? Bring your lawyer. You're going to need one. The next 4 hours were a carefully choreographed dance of legal consultations, evidence gathering, and strategic planning. By the time Masani strode into our building at noon, radiating his typical swagger in an expensive suit. We were more than ready for him. I had him escorted not to a conference room, but to my personal office, a power play he would understand immediately. Our general counsel, Renata, was already seated at my side, a stack of documents neatly arranged before her. Naomi, Derek greeted me with artificial warmth. Finally decided to take my advice? I decided it was time we cleared the air, I replied, coolly. Though I notice you didn't bring your lawyer as suggested. Derek smirked, settling into the chair across from me. I didn't think we needed to make this so formal. We're just two colleagues discussing market strategy. Is that what we're doing? I opened a folder and slid a document across to him. Then perhaps you can explain why your market strategy includes confidential information stolen from my company? Derek barely glanced at the paper. I have no idea what you're referring to. I gather intelligence from many sources, all perfectly legal. Including Preston Walker? I asked pointedly. A flicker of surprise crossed Derek's face before he could control it. Sumo, I don't discuss my advisor's activities. That's convenient, I noted. Especially since Preston Walker accessed confidential information about our Japanese expansion plans shortly before joining your board. Information that somehow made its way into your counterproposal to Takanaka. Derek's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. Allegations without proof are just rumors, Naomi. I expected better from you. Oh, I have proof, I assured him, nodding to Renata, who slid another document across the table. This is a time-stamped record of Preston Walker's access to our confidential servers, and this, another document joined the first, is a comparison of our proprietary strategy for Takanaka and the remarkably similar points in your proposal. Points that weren't public knowledge. Derek's confidence visibly wavered as he scanned the documents. This proves nothing definitively. We don't need definitively for a corporate espionage lawsuit, Renata spoke up calmly. We just need enough to create serious problems for Masani Tech's reputation and stock price while the case drags through the courts for years. I leaned forward. But it doesn't have to come to that, Derek. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. What are you suggesting? Withdraw your bid for Takanaka, I said simply. Issue a statement citing strategic reconsideration of Asian markets. Preston Walker resigns from your board immediately, and we all pretend this unfortunate situation never happened. And if I refuse, Derek challenged, though with noticeably less conviction. Then, within an hour, these documents will be in the hands of the SEC, the FBI's Corporate Espionage Division, and, just for good measure, the Wall Street Journal, I replied evenly. I wonder how your investors will react to headlines about stolen trade secrets and federal investigations.